You know them, you love them, the Atlantic puffin. With that colorful beak and that kind of comical waddle, they're just one of the most iconic birds out there, and they are tough. They're absolute masters of the open ocean. But here's the thing, they're in trouble, and their decline is this really strange mystery. To figure it out, we've got to look beneath the waves and see what's really going on.
I mean, just imagine it for a second. A puffin parent, soaring over the Atlantic, suddenly dives deep into that cold water. A moment later, it pops back up, and its beak is just stuffed, completely packed with these shimmering little fish, sand eels, maybe some herring. It's the perfect, high-energy meal for its hungry chick who's waiting back in the burrow. They are incredible hunters.
And that is the paradox, right? If they're such good hunters, why are so many of their chicks starving? Why are their populations dropping so dramatically? To get to the bottom of this, we have to play detective, and the very first clue is found right on their dinner plate.
Okay, so let's start with what keeps these birds going. The survival of an entire generation of puffins, it turns out, really hangs on just a couple of very specific types of fish.
You see, the whole key to this mystery is a super specific diet. For puffin chicks, people call them pufflings, to actually grow up and thrive, they need a constant supply of these small, fatty, really energy-dense fish like sand eels and young herring. And we're not talking about just a snack here. This is the essential fuel they need to grow. If they don't get it, the chick just isn't going to make it.
And this map just shows the connection so perfectly. You can see the journey these young herring take. They hatch way down south in these spawning areas, and then they just drift north on the currents, right into the feeding grounds of these huge puffin colonies, like the one at Roast in Norway. It's like a perfectly timed food delivery service, all run by the ocean itself. But what happens when that delivery gets messed up?
Well, it kicks off this massive chain reaction. Ecologists have a name for it, a trophic cascade. It all starts with something as simple as the temperature of the sea. That temperature controls when and how much plankton is available, which is what the baby herring eat. The amount of plankton then decides how many young herring grow up and survive. And finally, the number and size of those herring that make it to the puffin's neighborhood, that directly decides whether or not a puffin chick survives.
This chart really puts it all together. You can see climate, especially sea temperature, is the first domino to fall. It doesn't hit the puffins directly. No, it hits their food supply, and that creates this ripple effect all the way up the food chain. So the crazy thing is, the fate of a tiny puffin chick in its burrow is directly connected to these microscopic plankton blooms that are happening hundreds of kilometers away. But this whole system is way more fragile than it looks, and that brings us to our next clue. All right, this leads us to the next huge piece of the puzzle. It turns out that for the puffin's food source to really prosper, the ocean temperature has to be, well, it has to be just right.
Now, to figure this out, scientists got really clever. They dug into this incredible old data set, a record of puffin chick harvests from Iceland that goes all the way back to 1880. Can you believe that? And by comparing that historical data with sea temperature records, they found a critical link.
And this is what they found. This is the magic number, 7 degrees Celsius. That is the absolute sweet spot, the perfect sea surface temperature for the puffin's main food to really thrive. It's the Goldilocks temperature, not too hot and not too cold.
But, and this is a big but, the margin for error here is tiny. I mean, incredibly small. If that temperature shifts by just 1 degree Celsius, warmer or colder, the whole system just gets thrown completely out of whack.
And the consequence of that tiny 1 degree shift is just staggering. It causes a 55% drop in puffin reproductive success. Think about that. That's more than half of an entire generation of birds, just gone, all because of a seemingly insignificant change in the water temperature. But as it turns out, the climate isn't the only thing putting pressure on the puffin's food. There's an accomplice in this mystery.
So we've seen how this indirect threat, the climate, is hitting the puffins. But now let's look at a much more direct one.
So who's actually eating all these little forage fish like herring and sardines?
Well, if you take all the seabirds on the planet, all of them combined, they eat about 80 million tons a year. And humans? Well, through commercial fishing, we take almost exactly the same amount. We are in a direct head-to-head competition with puffins for the very same food.
And this competition has led scientists to identify a really critical tipping point. They call it the 1/3 rule. What they found by looking at 7 different ecosystems is that once the total amount of prey fish drops below 1/3 of its highest level, the ability of seabirds to reproduce doesn't just go down, it collapses. It's a line in the sand for the entire ecosystem.
Okay, so we've looked at the clues, we have a food chain that's being disrupted from the bottom up, and we have intense competition for whatever's left. So what's the final verdict in the case of the disappearing puffin?
The verdict is pretty clear. The puffin is getting squeezed from both sides. You've got climate change warming the oceans, which messes with the very foundation of the food web, and basically starves the young fish. Then, at the exact same time, overfishing is scooping up a huge chunk of the adult fish that do manage to survive. It's a devastating 1-2 punch.
And that is why this is so much bigger than just one bird. The puffin is what we call an indicator species. Its struggle is a visible flashing red light, a warning about the overall health of our oceans. They are the ocean's canary in the coal mine, and they're signaling a danger that affects every single one of us.
Their story isn't just about their own survival. It's about the incredibly delicate balance of our oceans and the massive impact of our own actions. The puffins are sending a signal loud and clear. The only question left is, are we listening?